Hey YouTube, it's Eric from the Reptile Room.
I have honestly been struggling with some ideas for videos.
Salem works here. He does. You'll understand why the name Bird was chosen. And this is also unfortunately where we're gonna have to leave things off for today. And that brings us to here. Now we have a lot of animals to go through in the classroom, so I figured instead of doing an enclosure by enclosure, we'd break it up into a few videos and meet some animals individually based on categories. Hey YouTube, this is Eric from the Reptile Room, and today we're meeting some of our large lizards, starting with this right here. This is Mr. Goober. Now, a majority of our large lizards are actually drop-offs that we've had here at the shop, so not ones that we've brought in as educational ambassadors, but animals that have been surrendered to our care due to different circumstances. Oftentimes, finding a place to rent when you have pets can be very difficult, especially when they're large reptiles like this. Now, Mr. Goober here is a green iguana, and these guys have the absolute best Latin name. It's iguana iguana. They are incredibly iguana-y iguanas, and they are also green. So very aptly named, just like the pink-bellied swift. Now, he's an old boy. I think that Mr. Goober here, he's probably creeping on 15, 16 years old now, and he is an excellent ambassador for us here. He is incredibly friendly. Mr. Goober here has not an aggressive bone in his body, really. All he ever really wants to do is hang out with people, get some attention. Now, these guys can actually get longer and bigger than this. Frankly, green iguanas, they make dreadful pets. In the 70s, these were very popular, or, well, 70s, 80s, 90s, even the 60s, I'm sure. These were very popular pets that you could get for very cheap. And unfortunately, they didn't live very long, generally as a result of the care. It was kind of recommended, you just have them roam around your house. If they need sunlight, they'll sit in the windowsill, which they wouldn't really get the UVB radiation they need. That doesn't penetrate a glass all that well. And a lot of people fed them cat food too. Now, interesting thing with these guys is they are strict herbivores. They are eating vegetation, they're eating a little bit of fruit, but they're not eating meat. So as you could imagine, cat food is, well, it's probably not the best option for them. But he comes to all of our birthday parties, well, when they request an iguana, and when he's feeling up to it. And he comes out a lot for classes as well. Now, if you're thinking about getting a green iguana as a pet, I'm not dissing that. They can make great pets. But you gotta bear in mind that despite the fact that the lizard themselves, they can be quite cheap, especially if you get them as babies. They're not cheap to keep. These guys are gonna eat more than you do. And they're going to occupy, I mean, if you got a large 8 by 10 foot walk-in closet that you could retrofit into a very expensively built enclosure for these guys, they can do great. But they do have very specialized needs that need to be met. Now, that said, they're very fun to interact with, and not all of them are. Mr. Goober here is our friendly iguana. We have another one who is a drop-off, who we're going to see in a second, who's, well, he's not Goober, that's for sure. Now we're just going to go over a couple features of the green iguana here a second. If you look underneath Mr. Goober's chin, he has this big flappy here. This is called a dewlap, and this is a method of communication that these guys will use for other iguanas. They can bop their head around and they'll swing this dewlap out, and it can make them look big, it can make them look enticing to females, it can make them look intimidating to other males. Goober does it quite a bit when we walk past his enclosure, and usually it's just him trying to get our attention because he wants, well, usually he wants a B-A-N-A-N-A. That is his absolute favorite food, and he actually knows that word, so I have to be very careful with it or he's going to get very hyped up. And considering they're not the healthiest for him, I don't want him eating too many of them. Now, you see these raised scales all the way down his back. When he first came in, I wasn't sure he was going to keep these, actually. He had so much stuck shed on him that a lot of the blood flow was restricted, but with a lot of bathing and a lot of humidity correction, they shed out quite nicely. He still does need a lot of bathing frequently to help him shed because they got kind of bent up in that whole process. He was already quite an old fellow when he was dropped off with us. But these can help him, again, to look large, intimidating, but also to thermoregulate themselves. Reptiles can't heat or cool their own bodies. With internal mechanism, they have to move around their environment. Now, if Mr. Goober here was basking and he was getting too hot, what he could do is pump some blood through these little quills, and that's going to act like a little radiator and help him with heat removal. And these guys have all kinds of different scales on them. You can see, I mean, I don't know if you can on the camera, but in his hands here, even the scales behind these claws are very sharp and grippy. This helps him hang on because he doesn't want to fall down if he's hanging way up in a tree. Now he has these big jowls as well. This is all muscle in here, but this is also to show off to other male iguanas that, hey, I'm the big iguana in the house, or to female iguanas that, hey, I'm the big iguana in the house. So similar message, but different meaning there. And if you look right on the tippy top of his head, there's this little clear scale right there. This is called a tertiary eye. It's not fully formed like his other eyes that he has closed because he's getting rubbies right now. But it can see light and or it can see the absence of light. It's photosensitive, basically. And this serves a couple purposes. When it's nighttime and light isn't hitting that anymore, his brain will release a lot of melatonin. It makes him very sleepy. And duly on top of that, if he's out basking and a large bird of prey were to fly overhead and cast a shadow, that photosensitive eye would pick that up. And he wouldn't be able to identify, hey, there's a bird of prey overhead, but it would be an early warning system to let him know to check things out a little bit more thoroughly. Now, he seems pretty lazy, but this is just because he's out and being held right now, and this is where Goober likes to be. This is his happy spot. Reptiles aren't capable of love in the traditional sense that we imagine it, so far as we know, but they can definitely develop trust, and they can, I think, definitely feel a liking towards people, or at least interacting with people, and Goober here is a great example of that. Anyways, we're going to move on from him and pop over to our other iguana here a second. We'll put you back, Mr. Goober. You done great. Thank you, sir. So this man right here is Godzilla, and he's less of an educational ambassador and more of just a resident at the shop here. Now, Godzilla hates me. Godzilla hates a lot of things. Godzilla likes very few things. But that's okay, because Godzilla, well, he does things his own way, and that's just fine. He's a little bit bigger than Goober, all in all. He's got a bit more length, and definitely some nicer colors on him. But he was another drop-off, and he certainly has his own issues. As far as we know, he was actually being housed outside. Now, if you live somewhere where the climate can facilitate that and keep them safely in that environment, that is a really good way to keep green iguanas. We live in Canada, and this guy lived in Hope, BC, which is, well, it's no Mexico where these guys come from. So not a great deal of exposure to sunlight, and definitely not a great deal of appropriate temperature for these guys. So he definitely has a few issues going on. He has something called metabolic bone disease. This is basically what happens when these guys don't get proper heating and lighting, and they can't uptake calcium from their food. So to maintain homeostasis in their bodies, they'll draw calcium from their bones instead, and it compromises the integrity of them. Now, this disease won't progress at this point. He has proper lighting, he has proper heating, and he has a proper diet. So he can't get worse in that regard, but this is never something that will completely go away. He just walks a little bit funny when he walks around. Now, he's absolutely not as thrilled as Mr. Goober was about being held, and I'm kind of surprised he isn't throwing a fit and head bopping right now, because usually that's what comes up pretty quick with him. But we love him nonetheless. He's a fantastic iguana. His behavior is a bit more akin to your typical male iguana, where you got to watch out for that territorial attitude of his. He might come after you a little bit when you go in his enclosure, but well, he's still just a little guy, so frankly we can just kind of move him aside, carry on, do what we have to do. He doesn't always understand that he's not in danger, and that, oh hi buddy, and that we're safe. Now, I'm not going to let him get as close to me as I do with Goober, because, well, frankly, I don't trust Godzilla that much. Anyways, I think I'm going to put him back because he's getting a little antsy and worked up now. But smile to the camera, Godzilla. Say bye-bye. Bye-bye, YouTube. Okay, we're going to move on from iguanas now to our other most notable large lizard here at the shop. Okay, so we keep 2 notable species of large lizard at the shop. Well, technically 3, and we'll see the third at the end here. But I don't consider the third to be all that large. This right here is Saber, and Saber is an Argentine black and white tegu. Now, she actually wasn't a drop-off. Saber was one that we purchased. A few years ago, Clint's Reptiles actually started making videos about Argentine tegus, and I fell in love with them. I'm a snake guy, generally speaking, but Argentine tegus really took the cake. They are undisputably my favorite reptile on the planet. So Amber, being nice like she is, she thought, I'll bring in some tegus. So she brought in a couple of captive bred baby girls. And when they came in, they fit in wee little deli cups about yay big. And we sold one and we held on to the other, and this is the one we held on to, Saber. And now she's a really gorgeous girl, a high white tegu. These aren't at all related to iguanas. These are divergent from them, but these do have a monitor-esque appearance to them. Kind of like a overweight, well, like an overweight Komodo dragon, but much smaller lengthwise overall. Now, that's kind of what I like about them. They have this very pudgy poisson sort of shape to them, which is, I just find to be absolutely charming. But these aren't at all related to the monitors. These are South America's answer. You have something in evolution called convergence, which is in opposition to divergence in many regards, where you have animals from completely different parts of the world that have very similar selective pressures and will adapt very similar adaptations to meet those selective pressures to fill that niche within an environment. And that's what tegus have done. They've filled the monitor niche in North and South America because we don't have monitors here. Now, these really get me on their intelligence. These are incredibly smart lizards. She didn't like that, I guess. Here we go, baby. Let's pull you in a little closer. These are really smart lizards. Saber here is actually a really good problem solver. If I give her a whole egg, she will take the egg, she'll pop a little hole in it with her tooth, she'll stick her tongue in there and suck out the innards, and it'll take her a minute or so to do it. She's very good at figuring these things out. Now, all in all, she's pretty social. She's curious about what people are doing. Right now, she's just a little slow because she was dug way down under the dirt. She was dead asleep when I so rudely interrupted her to make this video. So I think I'm going to pop her back, and we'll move on to our other tegu. Where are you going, honey? I got a mouthful of dirt now. How you doing, huh? So this is Sammy. And Sammy is my favorite animal on the planet. This is another Argentine black and white tegu. You can see Sam has a lot more dark colors to her. Now, Sam here was actually a drop-off, and she came in about a week before the little babies that we ordered arrived. So she was actually my first in-person experience with the tegu, and I never forgot that. I'm absolutely smitten with these guys, and Sam here has come a real long ways since she's been dropped off. Now, physically, she's always been in pretty decent condition. I'm not sure what her age is entirely, but I suspect she's a little bit of an older girl. Now, when she did come in, she had this little fat lip here, and she always has. It's never been an infection issue. It's never been anything along those lines. That can happen when tegus become really obese, which Sam isn't terrible. She's a little on the chunky side, but she's not morbidly obese by any means. It can also happen from potential trauma or jamming of the sides. Potentially, Sam was fed a lot of live prey in the previous household, and perhaps something retaliated. Either way, we keep it clean. Every few days, I'll take a little bit of coconut oil and I'll rub it on there just to help it from not drying out, and Sam does really well with it. It doesn't bother her or hold her back at all. Now, these guys are actually capable of dropping their tails like a gecko. And it's not so much that it gets ripped off as they're actually capable of popping it clean off of their body. and the tail will continue to thrash around for a few minutes, and they'll kind of regenerate a nub back in place, not very effectively on tegus. Now, as you can imagine, when you are a 10-pound lizard with 300 pounds of bite force, you're not going to default to dropping your tail when something threatens you. That's going to be a very last case scenario. So I don't foresee that ever happening with Sam, which I'm tickled about, because that'd probably freak me out a little bit. It'd be fine if it happened. They've literally evolved and adapted so that their tails can seal off and heal. It's not going to damage them long term, but it's not something that you want to have to experience or put them through regardless. So fortunately that hasn't happened, and well, we don't plan on it ever happening, so there is that. Now these guys actually have somewhat decent eyesight, but as you can see, the eyes are set to the sides of the head. So in many cases you hear about these guys being quite aggressive, and what happens often in those cases is people are coming at them head on very quickly. And I mean, these guys are a predator, right? They'll eat veggies and fruit as well, but they'll eat a lot of small animals. So if something suddenly comes right towards them and drops out of their field of view, they might make assumptions. So you do want to be able to read their body language. This applies to any animal. Horses also have a great potential for danger. If you can't read their body language and you're misbehaving around them, you could get hurt. And this applies to anything that you work with. Now, if you can read their body language, and I find tegus to be incredibly predictable and easy to read, there's no great danger in working with these guys. Even if Sam really did latch onto me, I mean, I might need a few stitches. There'd be some damage for sure, but this is not a life-threatening situation by any means whatsoever. Anyways, that's what we got for our Argentine tegus. I would love to talk about Sam more, because Sam is just my favorite thing in the universe. But we're going to move on now to our last large, well, this one's more of a medium-sized lizard. What's up? And this is our last one. Not quite as big as the others, but this is a monitor lizard. So we just saw tegus, and this was South America's answer to the monitor lizard. This is a true monitor. This is from the old world. This is actually a very tiny little relative of the Komodo dragon called a savanna or Bosch monitor. Now these were very popular some years ago, and Moosh is a little nervous with me. He's not sure what to think of this situation, but you're okay, little buddy. I'm not going to hurt you. This is another very smart lizard. They're very observant. They have the potential to problem solve, and this is from Africa. These guys. So a far shot off from South America, like the tegus, or Mexico, like the lizard, or iguanas, I mean. But these guys are equally charming. They've got really long forked tongues. The tegus have this as well. And this actually helps them smell directionally in kind of a stereo sort of sense, like you would with earphones, hear things in stereo. When you can smell scent molecules along the ground, and you can smell which direction they're coming from, how intense it is, it's really going to help you map out where things are coming from or where they're going. It helps them track things down. And given that these guys are kind of scavengy for a monitor, like these aren't going to eat a great deal of small animals. Don't get me wrong, if these guys come across a small rodent in the wild, they're probably going to go for it, but a majority of their diet is actually going to be invertebrates. So arthropods, you've got large insects, arachnids, big fans of mollusks. These guys are big fans of big snails and the such as well. Now they are quite lovely to keep in captivity historically, and this applies very much to the iguanas as well. These guys don't live very long in captivity, even when captive bred and produced. Now this has nothing to do with the fact that they're not a long-lived animal. It's oftentimes just that the care isn't quite on point in captivity with these guys. Whether they're not given enough space, the basking temperatures just aren't adequate, you're letting them live in your living room and feeding them cat food like an iguana. These guys very much, the number one killer of savanna monitors has got to be, oh, I feed them strictly mice. And they'll eat strictly mice. They'll eat pretty much whatever meat you put in front of them. But they're going to run into internal fatty tissue disease issues, which will drastically shorten their lifespan. So if you're offering them the right diet, these guys can live a lot longer. I think the average for these guys in captivity is 7 to 9 years, whereas I could very much see potential for 15 plus years happening with these guys. Now, this is not a way. Okay. I saw that coming. You're okay, buddy boy. Now this is in no way a means to promote. Okay, I think I'm gonna put him back a second. This is in no way a means to promote that we should not have reptiles in captivity, so much as any animal that we keep in captivity, breed in captivity, and care for, we're responsible for. And we should do so responsibly, do our research, and make sure we know what we're getting into, and then provide that care so that they won't just survive, but they will thrive, and we can experience these animals in their most majestic form. I'm gonna go put him away, and then we'll sign out. Okay, just one last quick one actually. This is not an especially large lizard, but this is the largest gecko on the planet. And if you've ever heard about a Leachianus gecko, you probably knew that already, because it's the #1 fact that people throw down about these guys. Anyways, we won't focus on that too much. Thank you for signing in, guys. If you have anything else you would like to see on our channel, feel free to leave it in the comments section. Leave a like and a subscription, and we will catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.